Welcome everybody to the MARG webinar. I'm delighted to announce the first ProSci webinar in this part of the world hosted by MARG. We are happy to bring ProSci's webinar first time in India. Our journey with ProSci began 4 years ago, and since then, ProSci and MARG have created an identity for change management and in different forums established a line of programs that develop practitioners in their change management journeys. Now we are providing these webinars with a local flavor to help the community immerse itself better into pro-sci research and take away the practical tools. This webinar shall be presented to you by Krish. Krish is MARC co-founder and director, and he heads our consulting function. He's the best person for this particular topic in specific because he brings with him rich experience of change management along with his knowledge on the ProSci methodology. He is a ProSci advanced instructor, and through his work on building enterprise change capability in India is also in his way of becoming the ProSci deployment leader. So over to you, Krish.
Thank you, Sudeshna. As Sudeshna said, this topic is close to my heart. It's close to my heart not just from my current role, it's also close to my heart from the time I was a leader. And I struggled with this. I personally struggled with this. And I want to bring up some of those elements in this conversation. Welcome. Good afternoon. I hope you have a really, really engaging 90 minutes. And more important again, you walk away from this 90 minutes with something specific to go do on your change projects. I hope you noticed when the loop was running, there were some tips there that said, try and make as many notes as possible as we go along, because I'm going to take you through a journey where I can tell you, based on research, hard research, what are change managers and practitioners and leaders like you and I doing today to make sustaining of change successful, to make reinforcement of change successful, to fundamentally make change stick. I know many of us in this call are not perhaps familiar with ProSci. This is the first time you're hearing ProSci. It's a name that comes out of two words, professional science. And as I often point out, while we all display the professionalism that we have in mind, the science part of it partly comes from the research and partly comes from what we do as change practitioners, right? How scientifically we are practicing the change is where the game is. The research that I'm mentioning about ProSci comes from the fact that ProSci has the largest body of knowledge on change. And the way we have accumulated it over the years is by asking practitioners, leaders, people managers, project managers, what do you do? What do you see when change succeeds, when change fails? And we've taken that and tried to distill this into as many things that we can go do now, as many symptoms that we can observe and say, oh, 1, 2, 3, that means we need to do these 5 other things. And as many cases used the compendium of knowledge we have to try and convince other stakeholders to join us in the journey of change management. The kind of topics that we have covered over these years are all specific to how we make change successful, who the actors in a change are, how do we ensure that people come along with us in the change and they are successful in that transition, right? How do we catalyze that individual change in a way that people buy into it and people succeed? For us, the change management is bringing as many individuals through their individual stories on the change and making them successful at the change. That's where our end game is. And as this slide says, our research is not just the overall research on change management. Sometimes we deep dive into some areas. A couple of those areas are on screen. A few of those areas are on screen. Resistance to change is an upcoming topic on a webinar. We're going to have a specific webinar on that. This one is about topical research we had conducted on the subject of reinforcement and sustaining change. The idea again, and this is probably true of all the research we do, specifically true of this one too, is how do we take this research information into something actionable, something that's practicable, something that's easy for you to go and execute right now. That's the intent of this session, of this webinar. One of the important parts about this webinar is to make sure that we are in sync. What I'm saying resonates. What I'm saying connects with you guys. Uh, because we've got a large number of participants, it's difficult to keep video and audio on. What we have done is made sure that I would probably occupy, say, a little more than half of this 1.5 hours, and then allow Q&A to happen towards the end. So we're going to have that. We encourage you to use the Q&A window all through, right? So we have a moderator, Sudeshna is the moderator, and she's going to be watching the window. And as and when something relevant comes up, we can jump in and have a conversation right here, right now. So that's one thing we're going to do. The other thing is we use poll everywhere. And I'm not sure if you have run into poll everywhere before. Poll everywhere is what is called a live audience response tool. What we are asking is right now, if you can go to your browser, either on your phone, on any of your phone devices, or on tablet, or on this comp itself, and go to that website, pollev.com/marg transform. Whenever you answer a question on that browser link, it'll pop up for us all to see, and we can discuss things on an aggregate. Right? And this is what we're going to be doing to make sure that this is interactive. So let's start with something right now. Can you guys switch to that link, pollev.com/marg transform, and respond to the question that you see on your window? Thank you. And as the responses come in, we are getting a flavor of the audience, right? We do have an audience who are ProSci practitioners who probably have ProSci or ADCA or something tattooed somewhere, right? Die-hard believers, I hope. And we have others who are saying, what is this animal called ProSci and what are we quoting? And I think it's going to be a good thing, a smart thing on our part, before we launch into the webinar itself, to talk about a little of the change concepts. So we are going to be doing some element of that. I find it interesting that some of us have seen the webinars, and big thumbs up to you who have. End of the day, the session is for, well, I said it's for change managers and for leaders. Sometimes those two circles overlap. And when I was a leader and I was looking for ways in which to make my changes stick, webinars, blogs, and research, and I was a geek, I still remain a geek, literature reviews were my source. So I think this split kind of represents a fair bit of where we come from. I'm getting a fair feel for the audience. So with this audience mix in mind, I'm going to be asking the next question, which is probably closer to my heart too. Making sure your screen does update. My next question is, this topic was making change stick. What drew you to it? What brought you to it? What about it resonated? Was it a personal thing? Are you on a change initiative that makes sense? Have you seen struggles with making change stick? I'm curious. Please, could you share your thoughts?
Krish, we are getting people to join in still, so there is a request to go a little slow.
Absolutely, I'll do that. Yes, organizational resistance to change, man. And that's an episode of Seinfeld where Seinfeld said, people stink. If we didn't have people, everything would go so smoothly. I don't mean that. I know this is a recorded webinar. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Lessons from the organization. Stakeholders, getting stakeholders buy-in. The fact that they have an absolutely different agenda is a challenge. How do you make change stick when every moment there is a fresh change being discussed, right? There are a whole bunch of external factors that come in when change is being dealt with. What I started and intended is not the same change I'm trying to make stick. The game changed in the meanwhile. How do you spell out the fact that the goalpost changed? I wanted to start with making one change, and now I realize that there's a whole program over here. I've seen middle managers come back and say, well, I thought this was us experimenting on one product line and trying to see what works. And now all of a sudden it's become a mantra for the whole organization. What's the deal here? how do you make it easy and attractive? And frankly, that applies to the whole damn change thing, right? How do you make sure that the whole thing is as simple? Uh, don't make me think. Make it happen smoothly is very, very important. Making clients think about change longitudinally is a beautiful point, right? How do you the history of failed change or the history of successful change? They all leave a thought process in the minds of our employees. And employees tend to look at the next change you bring in with the thought process of, yeah, we kind of heard it the last time and the time before that. And you don't really follow through with it, do you? The, the question around continuous resistance coming from stakeholders, you notice stakeholders pops up pretty often. And stakeholders are a big chunk of the equation. If I move this to a word cloud, there is change, of course, in the game. But if you notice, we have stakeholders being a fairly key point over here, right? Uh, and why is that important for us? It's important for us because if we didn't have our stakeholders aligned, if we didn't have stakeholders working with us, we can easily run into a problem, especially after the change has gone live, which is the stage we are talking about, where stakeholders are saying, I didn't get what I want. And since we are discussing reinforcement, that can be a powerful disincentive for people to stick with the change. So stakeholders continue to be absolutely important. And in today's world, it's quite normal for people to switch between the hats of owner and stakeholder often enough. So thank you for sharing this. I think this was extremely useful. And I think this is a counterpoint to the earlier slide. No matter our degree of experience with ProSci, the fact remains that when it comes to change, we all have our bruised kneecaps and bruised elbows. We've all struggled with it, and we've all succeeded brilliantly with it, right? And that's an important mix. Here's an observation that from a sustainment perspective, and I'm just going to leave this comment before I move on to the slide. Sustainment and reinforcement can be a challenge in personal change also. For us to see things through, for us to provide a follow through can also be challenges, and we'll probably touch upon it along the way. Given that this is what we have in mind as we discuss uh, reinforcement and sustaining, let's take a step back and clarify what is this animal called change management. In the next few minutes, I'm stepping away from just a topic of reinforcement and sustaining. And given the profile of the participants of the attendees being mixed, I thought it makes sense for us to take you through a little bit of what we mean, what ProSci means when we say change management. The first part is organizations adopt change for a reason, right? Unless you're in the Dilbert world, right? Sometimes it's unreasonable, but in most cases, we adopt change for a reason. And the reason can be in plenty. It can be we want to reduce the work from home, we want to increase the work from home, we want to get back here, we want to introduce a new product, we want to update our systems, we want to sunset something old, whole variety of stuff that we could be doing. And in every one of those cases, the interesting part is we get the benefit of the change, not when we roll it out, but when people adopt it, when people sign up to it. Organizations don't change, individuals do. Organizations don't resist, individuals do, right? That's what the sign of this is. If we don't have people buying into any of these, we have mixed success. And you've all been through that pain, right? Where you launched an ERP, you've launched an analytics platform, and people still love their spreadsheets. You've launched a performance appraisal platform, and people are still typing in, did a good job, and the manager says, I agree. And that's pretty much all you have as a performance appraisal document. Uh, we have seen M&As, we have often been called into M&As, where the immediate benefit of bringing two organizations together, the financial benefit, the taxation benefit, those have been reaped. But the integration has been a continuing challenge till a point is reached where it becomes formalized and people come and say, yeah, we have a couple of subcultures here. It's okay. That's who we are. So the point over here is as sensible as it is to look at the change from an organizational perspective. Big picture. Why are we trying to do this? We're doing this because we want to make our heads, our people managers, more technically competent. They are becoming more and more people managers, and we want them to start honing their technical skills. I want to make them less generalist, more specialist. I want to bring the organizations together. I have a whole bunch of weird processes. I want to harmonize them. I have a siloed culture and I want to bring the culture together. Any of these are organizational benefits of the change. However, we will achieve success on that change only when we have all the individuals in the organization going through that current transition future, those three stages. The current state is where I am today. Transition state is where you're taking me through and you're telling me the way I'm doing my job today has to be different. Either my mindset has to be different, the tools I'm using has to be different, my skills have to be different. You're telling me something has to change. The deal over here is if I don't buy into it, when I don't buy into it, your change slows down. And you can see it slowing down. We've all been through changes where we have seen as change slowed down, the number of people using something reduced, the amount of adoption we saw reduced, the amount of utilization of a particular tool reduced, the quality of usage reduced, right? Somehow people are still calling up and asking, I forgot my password, or every 1 year, whenever they have to go back to, or every 1 month, they have to update attendance, last day of the month, that's when they'll call up and say, I forgot the password, right? Changes don't stick and people don't get better at it. So we have seen the ill effects of the organizational change not being translated to an individual. Essentially, we are saying that for our organizational change to be successful, we need Anna and Bala and Chandra and Zia to say, yes, I have gone through this change and I'm successful at this change. When Anna, Bala, Chandra, Zia are successful in their respective change, when this change has touched people at an individual level and they have grown an ability to be successful at this change, then our organizational change becomes successful. This thought process is what we call the people side of the change. There is a technical side of the change, which is your solution, whatever you have in mind, whether it's a behavioral change or a technical change or whatever change, right? There is a vehicle for the change. I need people to do it. I need people to actually practice it. That's where the story comes. In the ProSci thought process, thought leadership, we have what we call ADKAR as a model of individual change. It's an acronym. And we're essentially saying that for people to buy into a change, get successful at the change, for them to be successful at the change, these are 5 outcomes they achieve, 5 stages that they pass through as they go through the change. It's an outcome-based model. So it's about how we can help them go through the change, how they can help themselves go through the change. Let's say an organization decides that we all need to be fit, so no more elevators. Let's all use a staircase. To start with, employees need to know why. Why are we doing it? Why has my health become your concern today? Why are elevators and staircases the best means to achieve that? Why are you asking this office to do it? Why don't you ask that office to do it? Why are you asking me at my age to do it? Why aren't you asking them at their age to do it? Why can't we have it as an option? There are a lot of these whys, right? And these whys are where the game starts. To start with, employees need to understand why. And we know, knowing ourselves and knowing people, that the why is not sufficient reason for people to buy into it. The why needs to now progress to their willingness to participate. I personally like ADKAR as a model of change because it has this choice, this agency on the part of people getting impacted by the change to be willing to participate. And we know just because the reasons made sense doesn't mean that it makes sense for me. At this point in time, my situation might be I'm dealing with other issues. I'm dealing with change saturation. I'm dealing with too many other changes happening in my life. It's not the time for this. I paid a lot of money to go to a gym. So by the time I hit office, I'm very tired. I started cycling to office. By the time I walked up to the elevator, I'm dead tired. I don't want to do this additional stuff. There might be concrete reasons. There might be, you know what, I really don't want to do this for whatever reason. I don't feel like it. There might be a lot of these I statements setting. An individual's willingness to participate comes next. But once you nail this, once awareness and desire are nailed, then we can progress to knowledge. It's important for people as they climb the staircase. There are going to be questions, right? Should I climb it at one stretch? Should I stop at every landing? Should there be water coolers in the landing? Am I done? And I knew I had 5 floors in the office, but I didn't know there was a mezzanine. I didn't know the steps were so big. There were a lot of things that we discover as we go through change, as change impacted people. Knowing the change is important, knowing how to deal with the change. Drink some water before you start climbing. When you land up, drink some water. Don't run into a meeting who's going to be huffing and panting. There's a lot of knowledge that can be shared, but you can't share it till you have nailed awareness and desire. If it's beginning to look like links in a chain, there is a reason for that. Because I'm not going to be willing to understand all these tips you have for me till I genuinely have a willingness to participate. And that won't happen till I know why. And even when all this happens, I'm on day 10 of this initiative and I'm still huffing and panting. But I'm huffing and panting a little less. I'm growing in ability. It doesn't happen overnight. Change is not a switch. None of these happen according to a predetermined schedule. So during this stage is when it gave me the knowledge, but now it's me going up the staircase. And hopefully at this point, someone has not launched a location shift where my floor went from 4th floor to 40th floor, in which case I'm going to have all kinds of other trouble, right? Ability grows. I get better at climbing the staircase. And that's the reason why you might have encouraging slogans. You might have seen encouraging slogans in the staircase. You might see like just statements saying, you're on the 3rd floor, you got 1 more floor to go. You have burned so many calories. All that encouragement is sitting over there because as the ability grows, we also need to reinforce that demonstration of ability. This is important. If we do not reinforce that demonstration of ability, the desire to stay with it can drop. Whoa, did we talk about desire a little earlier? Yes, we did. It is a sequential process. One follows the other, but it doesn't mean that once people are willing to participate, they're going to stay willing. As I know more about the change, my interest in the change might drop and my desire might drop. So I might go back and forth. Reinforcement is absolutely important because as the ability grows and it doesn't grow fast enough, I need something to keep me on the same page. This is ProSci's individual model of change. It's ADKAR. And what we do when we roll out change at an organizational level is take this concept of ADKAR and apply it to 3 phases of change. And the 3rd phase is called reinforcement. And in this stage, we do following steps at an organizational level. We make sure that we have.
Krish,
I'm sorry, was there a question? Yes.
Yes. This is Sudeshna here. We are getting
Yes.
a few participants who are saying that they are not able to hear. So I would kind of urge that, you check your Zoom settings and see if your Zoom audio is fine for for this for it to be audible.
Am I audible to you guys?
Yes.
Okay, so this seems to be an intermittent problem. Let me do one thing.
Is this any better?
Everybody is there. No, most of them are able to hear. So I would request the people who are specifically not able to hear to kind of, we are messaging them to check their, check their Zoom settings.
Connections? Sure.
Yeah, because, yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
I will endeavor, however, to speak loudly and slowly, which are something I can do. And do tell me in case my voice drops off altogether. So what we do during reinforcement, when I'm rolling out a change initiative, when I'm rolling a change project, I know that individually people need feedback on how they are doing. People need to know they're doing well, they're growing in ability, it's working, or it's not working, they need to try harder, they need to push harder, and so on and so forth. And for me to be able to do it at an individual level, if I zoom out, I also need to have a view at an organizational initiative level, at a project level. Did I get what I wanted? So I start the journey by, in the 3rd stage, in reinforcement, making sure I'm collecting feedback, making sure I understand what the storyline is, on where we landed. I check whether that was what I intended. Sometimes it's a very formal audit process, sometimes it's a lighter process, but in any case, I need to verify. I wanted this, what have I got? I'm going to come back to this theme a little later. Knowing what I want is absolutely critical. I need to have started my change journey knowing with the end in mind, with an idea of what does this new change state look like, measure like. So I need to have some idea of mind state to compare that. And then I go through perhaps the same process again. I've gone live, it's not stuck. And now I need to think about, since it's not stuck, what am I going to do to make it stick? It's gone live. Now people are using the staircase. Not enough are using the staircase. People have started using the staircase and they're running into trouble because some are going up and some are going down. People have started using the staircase and not all of them have continued using the staircase. People have started using the staircase, but they would like the elevators back. And for any of these, it's likely that I restart an element of that whole ATCA journey for that employee or for that group or for that team or that function or that leadership. I don't know the nature of corrective actions, but at least I know the issue and I can make intelligent decisions on whether that corrective action needs to be done in a particular way. That is what we do during this reinforcement stage. Notice that having done all of that well, we are now prepared to do two things: celebrate the success and hand the story back to the business saying, looks like we're done. All yours. This is your new normal. We transfer ownership. These are things that we get done during the time when we have gone live and we believe that the project is ready for transferring ownership. And this webinar zooms in on this portion. What all are the things that aid success in this journey? Some of the things that we already know as part of this journey include the following. It's on screen right now. I'm going to go quiet for 30 seconds and allow you guys to look at these bullets. Let's call it 20 seconds. As you all may have seen, what we're trying to do at this stage is make sure people don't slip back. We want to make sure the rubber band doesn't snap back. That's what we're trying to do here. And if we want to make sure the rubber band does not snap back, we need to focus on behaviors. We also need to have a good understanding of why those behaviors are present. And in order to make that, that's also a change, in order to make that happen, we need to think through at an individual level and then at an organizational level. Hence, if you look at the reinforcement of change, we're looking at it both at a group level as well as an individual level. Given that we're describing reinforcement as making sure that that ability of theirs stays and grows and they don't revert to the original phase, what is sustainment? In this webinar, we're describing sustainment as we're describing reinforcement as reinforcing those behaviors that lead to their individual success. And we're describing sustainment as sustaining the business results that you achieved as a result of your project. You've all seen the curves, right? Where you have an early adopters, you have a whole bunch of on go live, you've done your performance testing because, and courtesy that, you're very successfully able to get 90% of your employees all logging in, and then it tapers off. So you launched a blog. And on day one, there were all these users, all these articles, all these comments. And then that slowly tapers off. You launched an ERP. Everyone is using it. Everyone is logging in. Everyone is running reports. And that slows down and that tapers off. And notice that in each case, when these behaviors slow down, you're also going to see the fact that those results slow down. The results are not as powerful as you want. Hence, sustainment. We're trying to use sustainment to make sure that we have an eye, not just on reinforcement and the activities over here, but our business results stay consistent. This is the contours of what we are discussing in making change stick. It's not just focusing on the change and the individuals and the team, the people side of change, but we also want to make sure that the business results of the change stay consistent. This webinar, this research that was done, hence touches on all these areas. You get highlights out of it. You get an idea of who does the ownership, who does the planning for it, and what are some of the activities that sit over here, uh, defining success. What does success look like when you do this? All of these become exceptionally important. Let me dive now into data because all this was introduction thus far. Before I continue, Sudeshna, has there been any questions on what we have touched thus far?
No, we are getting questions on metrics, etc. But I guess
Right.
that those would be metrics, tools, etc. We would be covering them.
Yes, we would. We're going to have, we're going to pick various elements of what you're seeing in this report and sharing it with the team. Absolutely. All right. So now I'm hoping now we have a common understanding amongst all of us of what is this animal called change management. What is the people side of change? What is it that we're trying to achieve? What does it mean to get, Anna, Bala, Chandra, and Zia into the game? How do we get them into the game? What I'm going to do is also speak about a particular project that I'm very interested in. Um, this project happened prior to COVID. An organization was going through a reasonably complicated change. For a variety of reasons, their BCP had been invoked, and this was an organization with a global footprint, and we had employees working from hot seats. It was a KPO organization, so they were working from hot seats as well as working from home. The very interesting thing was in that journey, while they were working from different areas, the interesting part was they had started developing some exceptionally good collaborative behavior. People were willing to share information much more. People were far more sensitive of access. Meetings would be set up with an agenda. Meetings would be very, very decisive. People were comfortable and inclusive. Getting 10 people on together was not a challenge. And with all this, there was an increasing sense of camaraderie. The silos were actually dropping because all of a sudden it wasn't, hey, you're in that floor, I'm in this floor. We're all one call away. I'll not go into the because the because tends to be complex. What works for one organization may not work for another. But the short version, therefore, is during the time they were working remotely, there were a lot of good things that were happening. The organization was now coming back to their home locations, so to say, and they were wondering, how do we make sure that these changes that had occurred stay on? So notice the interesting part. These were serendipitous changes. They were not actually looked for. They were kind of almost a bonus, right? But it did come because people adapted and adopted to this new way of working remotely. They bought into it. They bought into it. They bought into the reasons. They bought into the context. They bought into the way of doing it, and hence they became more proficient at it. They were able to leverage it and amongst colleagues do a better job. And remember, there was very solid organizational outcomes that came out of their positive behavior. So all great news for leadership, and they're saying, I want to hold on to this. I don't want this to dissipate. I don't want this to go away. So that was the context in which we were coming in. Interestingly, we were the second effort. They had come and back, landed at the home location. There were temporarily good news that were happening, and then it was dissipating. So as I speak, I'm going to be calling out what had not worked and what we were trying to make work. So I'll call out both parts as we go through this reinforcement sustainment discussion. I think examples of not making change stick and the cost to them sit across the board. So with that, let's dive into the data itself. The first piece of data, and that's very important. Why should I care? Is sustainment of change really, really important? Am I going to actually get something out of it? The answer is yes. There is a positive correlation between sustainment of doing good sustainment activities and meeting and exceeding project objectives. 100% of participants in the study who greatly exceeded objectives, that's over here, 100% of participants who greatly exceeded objectives had somewhat successful to very successful sustainment activities. And of those who exceeded objectives, it's 97%. Damn good numbers to bat with, right? we're basically saying that when you do sustainment well, your correlation with great objectives, meeting and exceeding objectives is very high. Flip side, when you look at all projects that met and exceeded objectives, you're going to see sustainment playing a good role, playing a good strong role. And if I think about, is this worth my 90 minutes? Oh, yes, it is. So this is one part that I would like you guys to keep in mind. And the next part is also just as interesting. As usual, we're talking about, did I meet and exceed project objectives, which is the technical side of the change, which is about the project itself, right? So let's say I'm rolling out a governance change. Will sustainment help? Absolutely, because you have to keep reminding people that this is important, this is important, this is important. Don't miss ticking it, don't miss ticking it, whatever your governance changes. What about the people side of change? Does it make a difference to adoption? Does it make a difference to how people choose to stick with it, making change stick? Does sustainment play a role? Of course it does, 83%. We are saying that there is a high degree of adoption and there is more adoption and usage when you do sustainment well. And let's look at some of what happens when you don't do it, when that 17% happens, when you don't have sustainment. Number one, employees flip back. It's interesting, right? No matter what I describe as an ADCAR model, it's not a one-way ticket because people are people. I have a choice to improve an ability and then find it's not as fun as I thought. It's not as interesting as I thought. Very crudely, it's like you start singing a song, you feel really, really good about it. Then you hit the high pitch and you say, I really am not going to be able to carry off this high pitch, am I? And you stop singing, right? You don't necessarily go through with it. If you practice any instrument, you hit a false note and you stop rather than continuing on. Continuing on takes effort, takes support. That's where sustainment sits. It's hard. Building ability is hard, and employees can revert to the original stage. The second part is work must be redone. So take the example I gave you. They had to go through the whole change management piece again. They had to come back into the office. They were already doing something. It was not working, and they were doing the whole process all over again. They were taking people again through, remember, we were working remotely. We did these wonderful things, etc., etc. You're redoing work. You're creating a history of failed change. And not only does that take away morale, that not only does that make people feel, not again, it also is, the additional implication is change management doesn't work. You know, all this stuff is overthinking it, overcomplicating it. Let's just send an email and be done with it. You're tempting the organization to go in that direction. The last part is we fundamentally don't get what we expected. It may not be failure. It might not be something not being met or met, but it's just that you may not get what you wanted. Let me pause again and ask you guys, of these items, of these potential consequences of poor sustainment, which ones have you run into? This is again something that should come up on your poll EV now. And again, Sudeshna, while participants are, attendees are responding, any relevant questions, please post them.
I think people kind of joined maybe a little late. So somebody is asking about the source of this data. So
sure, I'll talk to it in a moment. So if you look at the data, if you look at what's on the screen, you're seeing change management credibility dropping is a big one. And I find that very interesting because in many organizations, it's probably the first or second time they're doing change management. Change management has been assigned to someone and they are dealing with the fact that, hey, I need to do this well, and my project itself is complex, and how do I bring people on board? So credibility topping is interesting. Goals being partially met is a lovely one, and it resonates beautifully with me because, like I told you, I have a favorite, right? That measuring outcomes, measuring success is very, very important for me. And the fact that we don't meet goals is a big chunk. It's very visible. Employees reverting to pre-change state. And I've heard this argument a lot of times. Krish, don't worry, we are not, the legacy system is going away. The old way of doing this is going away. Even if you sunset the old system, I've seen employees choosing, or functions or teams or leaders choosing not to use the one you gave me. I went to option C. So option A was sunset. Option B is what you rolled out for me. I'm using option C. Well, option C works better for me. And where do I classify it? Is that reverting to pre-change or not? So that thing can be fairly insidious. And well, larger scheme of things, it's not surprising that it happens, because eventually, when ability doesn't sit well, you're going to have concerns on the minds of the employees on, well, why am I continuing to do it? And that's one of the reasons why reinforcement and sustainment stick together. So with this in mind, let's now start talking about what is the story on making sustainment successful. Right. So I next want to talk about what are the contributors to success, given that these are the issues. From this point on, I'm going to be grateful if you guys can jot down on your sheets of paper key any finding that resonates well with a change project that you have in mind. And what that will do is, by the time we finish, I would like you to have something that you can say, okay, this looks like a story. This looks like things I can go and do now. So I'd be grateful for that. Before that, in answer to the question that came from an attendee, where does this data come from? Um, Short version, ProSci is the world leader in change management, and that leadership is derived from us having the largest body of research knowledge on successful change. And what we have done is taken that research and distill it into insights, actionable insights that we're sharing here, as well as tools and processes that we can apply on change. So that's who ProSci is. The research that we do, it's a core research that happens every couple of years. And in addition to that, we do topical research. We take a particular topic and do a deep dive into it. In this case, this was research done with, I think, about 650 odd change leaders. Uh, and the discussion was around the topic of reinforcing and sustaining change, making change stick. That's the source of all the findings that we're discussing today. What I'm sharing with you is subset of the entire report. So Suresh, I'm leaving that at this moment as an introduction to this data. In case anyone has further question, we can pick it up along the way. Right? All right, so now let's get back to scheduled programming. What are the greatest contributors to success in sustainment efforts? Support from leadership. It's our favorite. Those of you who are practitioners know it's our favorite. We know that over 2 decades, the number one contributor to success in change projects has always been leadership. But now we're talking about sustainment. We're talking about how do I reliably sustain the business results? How do I sustain the new changed environment that I am in? How do I do that? I do that with great support from leadership. That's number one. And that's taking ownership. So for example, in the project I'm describing, in the first time around where we failed, we had, so the team that was handling it, that was assigned the responsibility of, let's keep that goodness of the working remotely back when they are high, when they're back in the office, was HR. And HR would organize quizzes and game shows and floor walks and even street theater to at different places to make employees feel engaged, make employees feel connected. The leaders wouldn't be around. Leaders would have other meetings to attend. The leaders would have somewhere else to go. When leaders were asked for blog articles or video logs to describe what is their change state, mixed response. About 10% of leaders got back. When the leader, and this was at the CXO level, who had said this is something worth perpetuating, this behavior that we have shown is worth perpetuating, when they were asked, hey, would you spearhead this? Would you be the face of the change? He said, no. I believe in empowerment. HR, you do it all. I want you to be the face. So I'm giving you the failure modes in that particular project. I'm not saying leaders are not going to choose to do it. In fact, I'm going to show you some very encouraging data on degree of support leaders offer. But I want you to keep in mind that support from leadership can easily fail. And when it works in the same project, when we did it in the second run, we had leaders coming up and talking about their stories very emotionally. It's less relevant on how we call that flip occurring. But fundamentally, we had leaders come up and speak about what was different for them, about the challenges they faced. And that happened when they realized the value of them sharing it. We had leaders do that. And then the second part that we saw leaders do is say, we need to take this back to our employees on how good it felt for us that our silos were even stronger than where our employees were. the information was moving so freely. We felt like one organization. And when leaders started speaking about this so passionately, it made a difference. It made a difference that leaders started giving a percentage of their time to, to keeping these numbers running and numbers again. We created metrics that would help match to these results. Measuring progress, metrics. You need to have progress measured. If you don't have progress measured, remember, go live is a very noisy, celebratory event. And it's like a tsunami. It is going to wash away pretty much everything else that everyone wants to hear on what else remains. You're going to deal with a situation where people are going to say, well, we went live. Well, we had 97% people logged in. Well, we had so much of response in our training programs. And it's going to be easy to stop doing things there. So measuring progress, keeping in mind that our game is benefit realization. Our game is that people stick with it. Our game is not that people adopted it. We want people to start using it, stick to using it, get better at it, all three. And when you have success measures that map to these three, you have a better chance of success. Communications that encourage feedback. You all know very often that in change management, communication and training take precedence over everything else. And it's worth noting that communications that encourage feedback, that have feedback loops built into them, are exceptionally successful mechanisms. So these are the three things: support from leadership, measuring progress, communication that encourage feedback. I'm going to give you 15 seconds. I would like you to capture on a sheet of paper that you have in front of you. Let me say that slowly. I would like you to capture on a sheet of paper that is in front of you one of these items that you're going to translate to action in your project. 15 seconds. Thank you. Let's now talk about the greatest obstacles. What gets in the way of sustainment activities? I would expect to see usual suspects over here. It would be interesting to see if any of you have not run into any of these. Projects fail to address resistance, meaning your solution happened, your go live event happened, your trainings happened, all those visible artifacts of a change having gone through have happened. There are pamphlets everywhere, there are posters everywhere, there are mouse pads everywhere, there are placards everywhere. But people are not doing it. The equivalent of our people reverting to pre-change state. Leaders don't support it. And the fact that leaders don't support it gets in the way of us doing sustainment well. The remaining three are exceptionally important. We don't have, people have disbanded. The last meeting happened, go live happened, and we popped the champagne, and now I've been assigned to other projects. In parallel, it looks like it's just a blog, right? Can't you just send some communication, send something jazzy, send something interesting, and it should be done? You ignore the value of sustainment by the whole organization. You think change management is done at the time you went live. The last part is lovely because it's about the fact that now we've gone live and everyone wants to get back to work. They genuinely want to get back to work. They don't want to be having this chewing gum called change or this messaging called change continue. They don't want to have another meeting where the agenda is this particular change. I want to be done with it because I've got to work. And all of these were great obstacles to sustainment. Again, may I request that the attendees share what they have encountered or what they see as their top two.
Krish, just one
Yes.
question. So, meaning it seemed relevant at where we are seeing the obstacles. Is somebody saying that the project team thinks that the new system doesn't allow the end user to use the old system. It is stopping to work.
Yeah.
So why do we need change adoption or change sustenance measures?
Absolutely. So, great question. And if we go back to what is it that we're trying to achieve, we want three things. We want to make sure that people are wanting to be a part of this game. We all know whether it's a time tracking system, whether it's a modeling system, whether it's a data analytics system, if people don't really want it, it doesn't sit well. The change doesn't land well. So a state of mind that says, yes, I want to use it. I want to use it for my growth, personal growth, my job's growth, my job's achievement are all important. I need them to use it, meaning use it really well. I need them to use all its features. You can use the Zoom video platform to call up people and put it off. You can also use it to do polling. You can also use it to do interaction and so on and so forth. So you want them to use the tools they have really, really well. And here's where it gets interesting, because they use the older platform in a particular way, and they were power users. They were gods in it. They could do all kinds of magic in the old system, do all kinds of deep dives in the old system. And you not only want them to use it, you also want them to be that good at it. That is our end game. That's where benefit realization sits. Not when I shift complete usage of an old platform to a moderate usage of a new platform. I want them to meet and beat the kind of usage, the kind of value they were extracting out of the platform. If that is the game, and sometimes that's not the game. Sometimes it's just a matter of, yes, we were having Windows 7, now we are using Windows 10. Flip, we're done. Maybe it's that simple. But sometimes it is, we are using Windows 10 and now Windows 10, I'm using cloud. No one can store anything on their local desktops anymore. It's all going to be on the cloud. When you have these changes and you're interested in that benefit realization, that people actually use the new platform the way you want, then we are talking. When you're sunsetting the old platform and you're done with it, we have had this experience before. We were going through a change where it was a BFSI context. And in the BFSI context, there's thousands of systems because a lot of M&A activity, too many systems. Once in a while, you get a great opportunity to sunset something old. We sunset something old because we wanted to use a new system. What is the reaction? Yeah, the client is not happy with the new system. Yeah, well, this is not sending the mails the way the old system is going. Yeah, the reports are not the same. And the pain point was 18 months after the shift, be it an employee engagement survey or some senior leader flying in to say, how are things? The crib was that transition didn't occur well. The new system is not as good as the old. So where I'm going with this is, yes, sometimes it's just a switch on and switch off. But most of the time, since people are involved, your switch on and switch off, if it doesn't bring people along, we will struggle. And unfortunately, people realize what's going on only at the time, just before go live, when you started training them, or at go live. That's when they say, shit, that's real. That old, you're no longer going to have Lotus Notes, you're going to have only Outlook. You're no longer going to have Outlook, it's all going to be Slack. Really, you actually meant it was not a PowerPoint. So it gets serious only in that stage, at which point all of this hits. Sudeshna, did I answer to the spirit of the question that was asked? Is there anything else you would like to add? I think you're.
I think from that point of what the question meant was sometimes like if the old system is not at all there, is there? I think that partly you kind of answered, okay, whether the change adoption we need at all to measure it, but the need to measure should always be there in a way. That was her.
I'm just saying there is usage and there is usage and there is adoption. I could be using the new platform, but have I adopted it? Am I proficient at it? Am I getting good at it? Are two different questions. And where we are coming in with change management is the second question. We are always conscious of the fact that we don't want to go any further than where our sponsors wants to go, where our project wants to go. There are going to be projects where it's just switch on and switch off, perfectly fine. But where your leaders do want, or you want to have a value, a benefit realization out of this new platform, which was not there in the old platform, you need to get buy-in. When you need to get buy-in, when there is an effort involved in them making the change, you're going to need to have sustain. I'll wait to hear in case that answered your question. It'd be great if whoever asked the question is able to answer saying, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Just so I know I've handled that question. The data in the meanwhile.
No.
Sorry, Sudeshna.
Have an acknowledgement, I guess. Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you. So if you look at the data on the screen, I love these 2 points, right? Leadership was not engaged with the change and sustainment effort. Leadership not being engaged with the change and measurable outcomes. Those are the two biggies that we're going to be talking about. So it's good that it turns up as a common obstacle, that we know it's a common obstacle. So I'm going to give you guys another 30 seconds. No, let's again, let me go 20 seconds intervals. Can I give you 20 seconds for you guys to pick one of these um, challenges, just like you did one of those greatest contributor to success and you're going to do something. Given that these are potentially your challenges, these are things you are probably going to see, can you add one action item you're going to take to mitigate this for your project, to your sheet of paper? 20 seconds starting now. Thank you. From this point on, I'm going to dive deeper into the findings themselves, because right now what we have done was we saw why do we do it? We saw the value of doing it both from an adoption perspective and the project success perspective. We also talked about the fact that when you do this right, what are the successful factors? When it doesn't work out well, what are the obstacles? And let's talk about getting it done, the how part of it. First part is leadership support for sustainment activities. When we looked around to ask, does it actually work? Does sustainment actually work? Do sustainment activities lead to results? We said yes. The second question is, do leaders actually support? We know they're a successful factor, they're a key factor to success, but do they support? This is what I meant by saying it's very encouraging. We're saying that 62% of our respondents, in 62% of the respondents' view, we are having high degree of support, mostly supported, completely supported. That's damn good. And again, bonus factor, there is a correlation. There is a correlation between meeting and exceeding objectives and leadership support. So we're saying two things. One is it looks like leaders support more of, and it looks like that is it's a good causative factor for your project success. Correlation, causation notwithstanding. The next part is from a project team perspective. Let's think. So we said leadership support. You remember when we talked about obstacles, we talked about the fact that the project being disbanded, the project not having change management as an objective. Those were key factors, key obstacles. So question again is, what happens in real life? Pretty good, 74% of the case, there is some support from the project management side. People in the project management side are seeing sustainment as a part of the project's outcomes. That's damn good. With additional icing on the cake, there is correlation. There is a connection between the two. So we're saying that when you think about sustainment activities, leadership and project management, if you give them a good plan, if you give them good metrics, if you give them a good basis on which to practice it, you're going to have them supporting it. What are you going to give them as plans? What are you going to give them as things that can be done? 2-3 parts. Number one, you have to make sure that someone has defined what is adoption, what is usage. And it's not that simple, right? I'm asking you to be the fly on the wall and saying, yesterday someone was not doing something, today someone is doing something. What is that difference that you got because of the change? You sunset the legacy system. Remember, the legacy system had employees who were pretty much having most of their CV built around that system. We were, as an example, many of you must have heard from me before, we were moving from Excel to SAS. And people were very comfortable with the fact that I'm Excel power user, I can do this, I can do that. All of a sudden, SAS, I'm starting with ground zero. There is going to be resistance. And that resistance is going to, even if I can't do it on Excel, even if I can't give reports on Excel anymore, I'm not going to use SAS well. I'm going to do all I can in an extreme situation. I'm going to do all I can to sabotage SAS and keep pointing at that it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. It happens. So we need to be clear on what is adoption, what is usage. In fact, as a bonus, I would love to define what is resistance to. Needs to be done. The second part is making sure your communication didn't stop short with the last party that happened on go live. It's not just the pictures on we went live, there's a new platform, there's people using it, here are some happy users. It's not your last message. The message continues on addressing difficulties, challenges, and issues that people are having, making sure people still feel the support continuing. Remember, going back to my staircase example, climbing the staircase is difficult. Climbing the staircase day after day is difficult. People do need some support. In the case that I described, our biggest challenge was employees were saying, look, we would love to do all of that, but somehow it feels it was less busy when we were less busy, in the crude sense of the word busy, right? We had time to think when we were working from home. At the workplace, it doesn't seem to be the case. There's some distraction around me all the time. I want to look at this. I want to go for a cup of coffee. I want to walk around. There are so many things I could do other than thinking. That was an insanely beautiful insight to get for that particular case. The fact that, hey, somehow working in the office is distracting. It's taking away. So now what do we do? What do we do from a workplace planning perspective, from giving people space to think? Is it common areas? Is it time? Is it managers coaching? How do you do this? Because it's a beautiful insight, right? People saying, I have more room to think at home than over here, or at some remote site than over here. So those are things that are going to come up. Hence the initial comment on feedback loops. Hence, you need to continue communication. You need to continue looking for the why. Is this working? Isn't it working? Third and fourth, I think, are connected, right? One is the training part, one is the support materials part. You need to make sure that this often happens, probably because of budget reasons also. All training wheels come off. Go live happened, no more assistance and all. Please find your own way. The user manual is here. The blog is here. We have a hypercare system, deal with the hypercare system. No, you still need to help manage that change. The last part is, how are you going to call out the fact that growth in ability is important? As a sponsor, it was very easy for me to say, till we reach 100, we're not done. But I needed to go back and talk to the people who are at 80% and say, we're doing a damn good job, but more than the people who are doing 60%. How do I keep that excitement, the challenge, the competitiveness, excuse me, the gamification all alive? How do I do all of that? And when I do that well, when I do that recognition publicly, it helps. These were some of the sustainment activities that were employed. Again, 20 seconds. Can you guys capture on your screen, on your sheet of paper, which of these, many of these, some of these, one of these, would you like to use on your project? And try and make it as specific as possible, please. 20 seconds starting now.
Krish, something relevant came up. So just somebody saying that the example is nice, and that in fact in Microsoft, they dedicated one whole workday to only thinking. So that was
there you go. Thinking is tough. Right? And somehow our work environment is a notification-rich environment. That's not an Android and iOS commit. It's just that there are, I used to say this a long time back, knowledge workers are those who get to choose what to work on next. But I think the definition is becoming less and less reasonable. I think even knowledge workers sometimes feel like assembly line workers because your inbox is your assembly line or your next meeting is your assembly line. And they jeopardize priorities every time you're engaged in a mail conversation or in a meeting. In this case, it was interesting. I had a couple of, I'm hesitating to say millennials, but basically someone of a younger generation say, you know what, Krish, I would like to have one day where I'm very clear on what I think needs to get done and do that well. There's so many things that get in the way, I don't know where to start. And we are saying, okay, so if you had a choice, what would you like to start on and how would you make the case? And the person went blank and said, well, no one asked me that question before. So yeah, absolutely. There are many things that we learn when we go through change. Thanks for that insight. Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that, Sudeshna.
Somebody else saying that something like silent hours, dedicated hours in our organization to devote time to a given activity. I think it's real good stuff coming up.
It makes absolute sense. And this
One
draws
particular
me to,
question on this slide, Krish, is what do you mean by creating support materials for
so,
this?
so what are we trying to do? We want to make sure that, look, during the time the project is on, there's a lot of collateral running around. And that collateral could be kiosks, could be banners, could be noise around the, it could even be on PowerPoint, right? Every town hall includes that. We are still going strong on that project. It's stuff like that. Again, from a training perspective, while the project is on, especially when the interest in the project is peaking 3 weeks before go live, right? There's a lot of training, there's a lot of support in terms of subject matter experts around. People are willing to listen to and solve problems. Power users get heard more. Teams, when they go to your power users and talk, they get heard more. UATs are happening. So there's a lot of stuff happening there. You don't want all of that goodness to drop off on go live. What kind of support do I need after I roll something out is important. Um, my best example is you would find any discipline, think of a maturity model, you find a lot of data and a lot of learnings and a lot of case studies on going from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. You don't have that much on 3 to 4 and 4 to 5, because the assumption is by then you've matured so much and you need to figure out some things on your own. And that I see happening with projects very often, that project leaders start assuming, okay, if you're hit go live and you're at a reasonable amount of work, there's nothing more that I can tell you. You will figure it out within your work group. So support materials means that kind of project support materials that can be offered to teams for them to be able to perpetuate that growth, to to perpetuate the increase. So in our project, the case of the project that I'm describing, we had to think about the fact that people didn't, while the organization realized that the DNA of the organization had changed, employees didn't get it. So we have brought them on into the office. We needed to help them understand what is it that we were looking for. And that's where we had some of the leaders come and actually do a role play around it. And then the leaders started doing what we call coaching circles. We had every leader sit with a group of about 12 people, 90-minute meeting. Remember, it's a KPI environment, and you know how difficult it is to get operations guys to not do operations, right? We had to get them to sit with the leader and have the leader talk through, this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm struggling. This is why I'm not able to duplicate what I was doing back then. What do you think I can do? So it was a coaching circle, meaning it was coaching for the leader. And those were the things that made sense as a support for this project. So I'm not sure what would be the equivalent for your project, but think about going live is the easy part. Helping them to grow after that is the tough part. And that's what this is talking about. So Deshna, did that make sense from whatever you saw as a question?
And some people are also giving some ideas like playbooks and navigation videos or any repository, creating a repository for all the maybe the best practices created during the process. Yeah.
Micro videos make beautiful sense. More KT sessions, more knowledge transfer sessions make perfect sense. I'm a big fan of making it face to face. Make whether it's electronic or otherwise, make people hear and see stuff. But I love the idea of playbooks. Playbooks work a lot of times. Playbooks touch upon use cases. So yes. And let's connect this back. All this is important given this part, given the fact that we need strong metrics. So when we asked our participants, what are typical metrics you use during sustainment? This is what they gave. Again, I'm going to go quiet for 10 seconds for you guys to just absorb it and try and pick one or two that you're interested in a sheet of paper.
So Krish, we are incorporating now all the questions within the session because in the total
Yes.
now the time left is 15 minutes. We have 15.
I understand. I'm wrapping it up in the next few minutes.
So in terms of
had
a specific question on when should we decide the metrics of success to be used in the adoption phase? And
yes, please.
Yeah, did you get that question?
Yes, I did. Was there anything else?
And
you said
and we are at a stage of the project that we have consistent adoption, but how do we improve further? So I think again the metrics is like kind of they want to move the metrics or it is not very clear. So you may take it accordingly.
Sure. So I'm hoping some of you at least have written down a metric that you think you can use in your project. When should you do this? You should do this in the beginning of the project. by definition, I want to know before I start writing the exam, how are you going to measure me? How are you going to, what's the report card, right? If you don't do that, between sponsor, project manager, and you may not be aligned. The metrics are your best alignment tool so that the three pieces, three legs of the stool that are midwifing the project, the sponsors, the project managers, change managers, we're all saying, yes, this is what success would look like. So beginning of the project is when you want to land the metrics. But life is not that simple. You learn more about the project as you go along. Sponsors learn more about the project as you go along. I have been in metric negotiation along the way. So the best practice, as the participant said it, as early as possible. We saw that a little earlier also, right? Doing it earlier makes a lot of sense. I'm going to show that again as another insight that came from participants on what would you do differently, come in as early as possible. So that's one facet. The other facet of, I'm not sure. So we had a case where adoption was at 95%, and the stakeholders said we want 99% before we stop. We told the stakeholders that look, this is like a telecom SLA. 95% and 99% are very, very different in the kind of organizational energy you want to spend. Nevertheless, the ask was, I need more adoption. The answer to that question was two stages. What is stopping the remaining 5%? I need to understand why. So we did focus groups. We had conversations with them on where they were struggling. Sometimes of that 5%, we had some groups that were saying, it's the wrong time. I can't do it now. I got these priorities. So it's just a prioritization issue. I will do it. I can't do it now. So that was one kind of response, tick mark, so long as it's reliable, and we move on. There were some groups that were saying, I really won't do it. And we had to go through an entire resistance management process in order for them to be brought in. In the case of this project that I'm talking about, there were these groups. When we finished off, we had about 70% of the groups adopted. The rest had not, for a variety of reasons. One group said, I don't have the kind of stakeholders who will allow it. While we were working from home, we could do some things. Now that we're back in the office, they want something else. So what do you do to heighten adoption? I need to know why is your adoption where it is. You need to know why your adoption is where it is. And why your adoption where it is an answer that two people have. One is the employee who's not adopting, and two is the sponsor who's in charge of that group. Those are the two people who know why the adoption has not taken place. I would start there. What kind of metrics would I use at that stage? The reason why it talks about ADKAR model scores and adoption usage reports. End of the day, no matter what, if you notice, many of these are lag indicators. They're all the things, good things that happen when everyone adopts. But if you look at these two, and even stuff like attendance at events, there was one more beautiful one. Number of workarounds created. There's another one that I loved.
Somebody is asking
service level
and process health.
Sorry, just one second. So service level agreement compliance. I like these ones. I tend to use these ones where I really want to know whether they're bought into it or they're saying, okay, change manager and change and sponsor get lost. We just want to be done with the project. But when I see adoption usage reports, workarounds created, there is genuine compliance over these stupid documents, etc. I know that they have actually bought into it. Process health indicators are indicators depending upon what I was trying to change. Turnaround time, great indicator. Errors, number of errors, number of corrections, number of rework, great indicators. Process health in terms of compliance on who's approved what at every stage, great indicator. Reduction in number of handoffs, great indicator. So depending upon what you were trying to change, the health of a process is a great thing to test. Just like I mentioned, number of workarounds created, they kind of go together. I'm creating workarounds because I want the process to be faster. And if I'm creating a lot of workarounds, it means technically maybe I didn't do well. But behaviorally, it also means I've taken greater ownership. So depending upon what you want to change, you want to pick the right metric. That makes sense to you guys? If it does, and please get back on Q&A if it is not. Last few things that you should know. One, we asked our survey respondents, what would you do differently? Like I said, first thing was I would start as early as I can. I would like to think about sustainment. I would like to make sure that we are all thinking about sustainment as much as possible. The second thing is I would make it very clear that you do this, I will do this, and we'll do this in this order. Our plans would be more specific on which roles would establish and do what, by when, and what would it look like. What would it look like is success metrics again. Make sure that stakeholders are not ignored. Because as I said before, The moment a stakeholder says, hang on, immediately every employee is getting a feeling the pit of their stomach saying, hey, feedback is going to be negative. What do I do? The last part is make sure you're transferring ownership to the leader. You need to make sure that someone in the leadership is saying, yes, I own up to the fact here that here are the 15, 20 things I'm going to keep doing, and they're extremely important. How would I achieve this? I would achieve this by making sure that at every stage, all these roles are a part of the game. We said, look, I get the things you do differently next time. Absolutely. But help me understand, how do we get this done? Who does the planning for it? The first two responses, and remember, these answers are ranked, right? So these two turned up as the most frequent responses as the people who, as the roles most ideal to do this planning, followed by these. And the message was very clear. Different roles have to do this collaboratively, have to come to it in a very, very consistent, meaningful, aligned way. The last part is back to success, because we don't, you remember earlier on I said we change for a reason. It's likely that your project leaders and your organization has not thought about sustainment as an independent activity. And if they haven't, this is a change too. The only reason that change makes to them, the change for a reason, is you have a success metric, you have a measure, you have a benefit realization goal that is connected with it. And when for any of those reasons, success is not well defined, either it's too technical, leaders are focusing on the technical change. Yeah, sunset this platform, get this platform up, stop this behavior, get this behavior up and running. I want to do it by this date. I don't care how we do it, but on this date, this switchover must occur. Or guess what? It's not my job. The lack of organization. It's not my job. I'm the CTO. Those guys told me to do digitalization. I'm rolling it out. Whether that business unit uses it or not is not my baby. If any of those creep in, then you're going to have this result. 72% of the organizations not being effective at setting up success metrics. So the intent might be there, but the willingness might not be there. Yeah, I get it. I do want to do sustainment well, but yeah, what's the point of doing it? What if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. That was the last point I wanted to make. So I would like you to look through your, I'm giving you 10 seconds again. I'd like you to look through that plan that you roughly created and address these last couple of points, right? Are you having enough connection with the different roles, business owners, leadership, project managers, et cetera, to make them believe in sustainment? And are your metrics clearly enough described? If you can capture that, I'm giving you 10 seconds on capturing it on a sheet of paper.
I would like to say that we are going towards the end of the time. So we are getting a lot of questions. So in case your questions aren't answered during the time we have for the session, we would definitely, we will definitely give you an answer within the next 72 hours. We will try to post the answer to you on a personal. And somebody is asking whether the poll responses will be made available. To get the poll responses, you need to give us a mail separately and we will make the poll responses available.
So we just don't want to spam you. So if you're interested, please drop the question. I don't mind staying a little bit. I think we can stay a little bit on Sejna, if that's okay with you. In case someone can stay on also and can try and address some of the questions.
There are one
the
or
reason
two
we did this
really good.
Yeah,
so,
valuable, right? So just one closing thought from my end is the reason why in that project sustainment became very, very important is because, like I said, the organization actually flipped. They were a different organization for a short while. The CEO was saying that, look, you know what, it felt like I was a startup again. It didn't feel like every issue that usually comes up, global organization, you didn't tell me that, all that had disappeared. For some time, it felt really, really good. I want that back. So keep in mind that it's easy for people to revert to older behavior. It's easy, not because older behavior is better, but new behavior is difficult. Learning something is difficult, practicing something is difficult, and we need help. We need support. We need structure. So reinforcement of behavior individually and sustaining business results collectively is something that is a lagero munna bai, right? You need to keep pushing it for some time. before you're sure that it's reached a point where it will stick. Making change stick is science, it's not art. You get all these factors in play, we can be successful. Getting organizational intent around it, making leaders want it might be the challenge. But if we get that, we probably have a success formula here. With that, I'm done. Um, I do have one question for you on poll EV, which is what is something you would like to take away from this webinar? Any key takeaway, anything that popped in that you really thought made a lot of sense? What is something that you are definitely going to do when you step away from this webinar? Absolutely. It does need to be a plan. It does need to be a strategy. The others didn't go through the webinar. So they are still like, yeah, why are they making me do so much work? Absolutely not. NPS, not adoption. Yeah, they are points in time. Knowing why the numbers look good is very important. That's, as a leader, that used to bite me in my back so often, right? The number is good, let's call it out to the stakeholders today. 2 days later, it's dipped and I'm defending the dip. Yes, people and not organizations change. Absolutely true. I tend to be passionate about the subject because as a leader, I struggle with a lot of stuff. Bringing people along, it's not easy because people have their own minds. You're not hiring hands and legs. You're also hiring brains. You're also hiring minds and hearts. Getting them along takes effort. Absolutely. Getting the bosses in makes perfect sense. Thank you for that measurement matrices. I was waiting for a metric one. Yes, if it's going back to the whole thing, right? You don't improve what you don't measure. But I think what you measure helps other roles understand what you're trying to do. They understand your motives a little better. Leadership buy-in, absolutely. They need to buy in. Leadership need to say yes. Absolutely right. Plan the action for sustenance and keep the focus on implementation of stuff. Absolutely. So Deshna, while these come up, are there any questions you would like to share?
Yeah, one particularly, like a couple of questions, like more than that, on the correlation of organization culture with sustained change. Is there a correlation, and how does sustenance plan will change if it's a different org culture?
So our studies have revealed that there is a high degree of correlation between change management the success of change management. Let me rephrase this. There is a high degree of success between the correlation between how change is going to occur and the culture of the organization. Practitioners have consistently told us that if we ignore the culture, then we will struggle in the change. So culture needs to be addressed when you're managing change, no doubt about that. But the question here is there a connection between the culture and the success of sustainment? And that's not a question we asked in the research. So I cannot say the research says this. And quite honestly, in my experience, I've not seen that connection. I've seen very regulated environments, PSU environments, adopt change very well. I've seen e-com environments, which are dealing with change every instant, struggle with change broadly. Sustainment is a different animal altogether. I've seen organizations put heart and soul into sustainment, even when they resisted the change for the longest of times. They push back on the change, but it went live, and then they say, you know what, it's here. I'm going to make it work. I've seen that happen, and I've seen changes go after go live because the middle manager said, you know what, I'm no longer interested in doing it. So I've seen all kinds of issues, which I don't think is culture. It's about the leadership. It's about the tone leadership sets up. I've seen leaders set a different tone for one change and behave entirely different for all the other things they do. But this one change they took very seriously and set a great message around it. I've seen it succeed. That's my experience talking. The research, I don't have research data on sustainment and culture. Does that help? I hope that helps. Suresh, any other question?
in terms of like, how do you measure profitability ROI for change?
So we measure ROI by, so I'm just giving you the playbook, right? So first you have a baseline. You have a baseline on the return on investment on change based on how soon your change is going to go through for what percentage of the population. I have some meaningful metric on what is the value of each person buying into the change. So if I take an ERP or if I take a Fitbit and I'm saying everyone who walks this additional step in the Fitbit gives me $1. It's very clear to me that the more people walk more steps, I make more dollars. The more people use macros well in my organization, I make more money. The more spreadsheet models that are better, I make more money. The more people who record time, I make more money. There is some metric between my change and the money I make. I need that connection. The more people are proactive, I get more money. The more my sales reports and my collateral is connected, I make more money. So long as I have that relationship, then it becomes a matter of how well I'm able to measure how many people are flipping, right? And that's something usually between me and my project manager, I can figure out some tools, some mechanism by which I can make it happen. I track three things. Number one is how many are adopting, how quickly they are adopting. So I usually go around asking, what's your baseline? Typically in your organization, you take 6 months on this kind of a change, 9 months. When you last did a change like this, how long did it take? Versus baseline, how fast am I adopting? How well am I using this? Am I using just the front page or I'm using different tools, etc., etc.? And I get usage reports easily enough on that. Third part is how good am I at it? I can measure tickets, I can measure kind of questions managers asking. I love to use the number of occasions where I'm seeing senior leadership use reports that came from the system. Either they were passed on to them from the middle managers or they're using it themselves. And both these make great opportunities for me to measure adoption, utilization, proficiency. And from here, I can connect back to, remember I said, right? Dollar per, everyone who buys into my change, I have a dollar differential on my profitability. I can connect this back to ROI. So I actually can have a nice graph that says before and after.
Krish, we have come to the end of time, so I would say, like, we put in the like, you know, the feedback
Sure.
so that people are able to give us the feedback, and then the questions. There are many more questions which are here, and we would, in the interest of time, we would definitely get back to you with the question answers, and the slides will be made available to each of you who participated in this webinar. Apart from that, if you require the poll results, then like send us a mail separately. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day. Bon appetit for your lunch.